that was proper stress.
Like,
I didn't think we were going to happen then.
I haven't done an Instagram live for a long time, so I was like, I don't know what I couldn't expect. There was nothing coming through on the chat. There was like no invite. There was no anything coming through. I was like, please, there's nothing here other than say request. Like I then like click the button and it's like, nope, nothing's happening.
Yeah, I was pressing the accept button for you. It was just wasn't changing. It was staying blue. And then every time I sent an invite, it then reset itself. It was just a nightmare. Well, thank you. We made it in the end. Thank you for coming on. Thank you for persevering with us. How are you? How's your day been?
Oh, thank you. My day's been good. It's beautiful weather here in the UK. Right?
Yes, it is very nice weather. I have been out all day and I probably have a bit of sunstroke now, but you know, it's worth it. You've got to make the most of it.
I've been working
So,
all drinks.
say again, sorry, your sound went then. Hopefully that your sound won't go, but your sound went for a second. Then what did you say? Sorry.
So I was having some nice cool drinks working outside. It's great.
Cool, cool. So, for those people that don't know, Maxine, tell us a bit about yourself and how you got involved in this hobby of ours.
That's a deep rabbit hole you
It's a
asked. So
deep rabbit hole. Gives me time then because I've written all the questions down here, but I have writing, as my mother says, like a doctor. So it's so I can decipher my own writing on the questions while you talk. See.
Maxine, I got into the hobby. I don't want to date myself too much, but now 19 years ago.
Okay.
So quite a long time ago. My mum basically dropped me off in a shopping mall Warhammer Games Workshop shop, and I basically run in there. I run an Instagram like yourself, and I'm mainly focused around like the tactics and strategies around playing 40k, kind of taking on either tournament tips I've done or just in general from my more chess background. And just I look at the game more from a tactical perspective. Not to say that I enjoy the game in other ways as well. So,
Okay. And what got you into was it the chess side of things that got you into the tournament side of things? What attracted you to competitive 40k?
I think it's more just how my brain works. So I'm someone that likes to come or gets given a rule set and tries to understand how best can I use this rule set to meet an end objective, whether it's score points or full annihilation, depending on the game mission that you're playing. And I just try and do the best I can with that. I do the same with board games. Chess is a very similar scenario. And I guess as much as I enjoy more narrative games, I always like to see the mission be completed in the best way I can. So if someone gave me a narrative mission and we were to play it in a more narrative fashion, or to have like a more narrative mission, I'd still play it in the same way as I play competitive games. I try and make the most optimal moves. I try and understand how best the stats interact so the right units are targeting the right stuff. That's what I enjoy. I tend to struggle just randomly just eating things for no apparent reason.
Yet you play World Eaters and you have trouble just eating things.
Exactly, and I play it mainly like Space Marine armies, whether World Eaters or loyalists. They're still supposed to be decent tacticians,
Mhm.
and in playing in a more narrative fashion sometimes. If I was to play orcs, for example, and I was doing like these deep traps and those kind of things, I think that would be a little unflavorful when playing narrative. But Space Marine armies, I think you can play the same way in both competitive and non-competitive and still be narrative.
Yeah, yeah. So we have got some questions from over the last couple of weeks. So the first one I'll ask you: you have to collect one army from your favorite opponent. Who and what would it be? And that's from Baron Paints.
Oh, that's a great. If I had to collect one army, or I
Okay,
would
you have
just like.
to collect an army from your favorite opponent. So whoever your favorite opponent is, who and what would it be?
Okay, so if I basically like I steal their army.
Yeah, you steal their army.
Okay, it would probably be Michael Costello's Talon Astra Militarum, because they're gorgeously painted. They look really nice. Um, and I do quite like a guard army with some nice tanks. Like he paints all the nice rivets and everything. So I think that'd be the army that I'd most like to have in my own collection. There's lots of armies I've enjoyed playing against, but I think that would be the army I'd most enjoy having and having on display.
Okay. So going on that a little bit, what attracts you to the armies that you do play? Obviously, everyone probably knows that you play. You've got Dark Angels and you've got World Eaters. What attracts you to those armies? What appeals to you about them?
Great question. So the first time I got into Warhammer, like right when I started, um, I really liked the Tyranids and the big monsters, but I also really like the sort of I, I wouldn't say like formulaic, but or structured um, setup that you got from Space Marines. Now, back when I started, Chaos Demons and Chaos Space Marines were mixed into one codex, right? This gave me an opportunity to have both that structure of Space Marines, but also the big monsters, i.e., the demons. And I really wanted this and the bloodthirsters. That's kind of the mix I got. But when I then later got the box set for, I don't want to say it was maybe 7th edition, where you had the Dark Imperium one, where you got the Dark Angels.
Yeah.
I began exploring sort of their lore and how they kind of structured themselves, and I found that really appealing. Like I am someone who is autistic, so I appreciate those kind of answers, and I think that's something I like to bring on the table and also have as an army on display.
Mm-hmm. Do you think the autism does help with things like attention to detail and planning things out? Is that something that you think might help with with your tactical playing? Obviously, you're known for being a very, very, very good player tactically. Do you think that plays a part in it, or?
I think so. It has autism is something that has both pros and cons. I always see it as my own personal superpower, and it's something I embrace. I wouldn't change who I am. I, it's hard to say without being neurotypical what how people think, I guess, or what the changes are. But I'm definitely someone who can plan a long way ahead. I kind of see things how they want to unfold based on what either opponent's actions would do. And as much as I am autistic, I'm relatively good at reading people, more so in the actions they do on the board. So people can telegraph what they're trying to intend. Sometimes that's either in their list composition, their deployment, or some of their first few moves. You get a real understanding of actually what is their game plan.
We have got some stuff coming through on chat. I thought my chat had frozen, but it hadn't. I just scrolled all the way down. It didn't move. So I thought no one's talking in chat, but they are. I just didn't see them. So we've got 30 Samo 3. He says he's the #1 Maxine superfan. There you go.
Thank you. I thought that was me.
Apparently not, unless unless you've got another account on the go on a separate side.
I think my #1 fan. I'd be shocked if you chat. Because I once had an Instagram live where I was doing one. I was doing one with a friend at the time, and she tried to request to join because she didn't understand quite what the Instagram live function was. And I was like, "Mum, no, Mum, this is not for you to join." That was quite funny.
And then JT drop 777 says it makes me laugh when I hear my mom drop me off at GW. Same thing happened at the one I frequent. Seems like GW is a more expensive babysitter sometimes. Was that just the case? Were you just shopping and she just went, "There you go and sit in there for a bit"? So I was never, when I was a kid, there were no GWs near me. So the first GW when I think I was about 18, 19 when the first GW started up. So I've never had the being dropped off at the hobby store, but it seems to be quite a common thing I mean, how did that come about? Were you just like, was she just like, I need to do some shopping. I need to get my child from under my feet. That looks like a nice place. They look like nice people, and away you go.
Pretty much. Like she understood the kind of things I enjoyed. So even at that age, I enjoyed model railways. I enjoyed airfix as much as I didn't paint and do the things. I enjoyed looking at the magazines with them in. And so she understood I enjoyed that kind of environment. And when we were walking past, I was goggling basically through the shop window, looking at these painted models and this big war game board setup that they had. And she said, "Well, why don't I leave you in here? I can go and get some Christmas shopping done." And I was like, "Okay, that sounds really nice." So I think we both were like super happy with the arrangement, and I wandered in, and as much as
Then the bang bones regretted it ever since.
probably, yeah.
Gareth Dante Paint says, my mother was the one who bought me a copy of Rogue Trader from Athena in Canterbury. I didn't even know Athena sold GW magazines. And then JT drop 777 even says, got to say, I have more respect for Maxine now. Dark Angels is my number one army, and World Eaters is tied for second.
They're great two armies, and I always like when what armies do they want to choose? I have a bias towards those two armies. I have a third favorite, but I won't cross that yet, just in case it comes up. And I always say to Space Marines, and you kind of appreciate their aesthetics. I think they're one of the most perfect first armies to get because they do basically they have three armies in one. They have both three paint schemes, they have three play styles. You can mix and match, and they look great on display. Um, so I think you know it's hard to go wrong with that. Just I keep telling people they kind of do everything. If Space Marines in an edition, Dark Angels will be good. They just will always have a trick that they can do.
And Alex Duck 24 says, of the fellow Unforgiven enjoyer, what's your favourite Dark Angels unit?
Great question. Um, the standard Deathwing Terminators do always get. I like the Thunder Hammer Storm Shields in that paint scheme. I think they just look super sweet. But if you want to go to like super specific Dark Angels unit, rather than say just like Assault Marines in a different color, basically, I'd like to say that new Sword Brethren unit that's kind of come out. With the oh man, what's it called? My brain's literally just gone blank on it. They're part of the inner circle.
Oh, the new ones that is it they aren't the Risen, but they are the Risen. They're the ones too.
They're like companions or
Yeah,
something. Oh my
something companions. Yeah, I don't. I know which one you speak, but I can't remember the name either.
inner brain fade. I think that would be up there as my favorite because 30k Dark I love, and I love seeing the Raven Wing bikes. So having them on an infantry unit, which is my preference, is really cool.
I've lost the chat again now. This is another thing about Instagram. The chat disappears as you've got to scroll back. Just doing it again. Let's see how far I can scroll back. So there was a question about Deathwing. I've just saw it. Let's go back again. Oh yeah, Matthias Beard says, "Is there anything else other than Deathwing?"
God,
You played? You've played an all Deathwing list, haven't you? I seem to recall.
I usually try and pluck for a hybrid. So even if I'm running 90% Deathwing, I try and have one of Greenwing and one of Red just to make me happy. Um, but I am beginning to start enjoying to lean into more full Ravenwing armies. Um, Less so on the speeder side of things. I'm still yet to embrace speeders in the same way as bikes, but I'm enjoying having as many bikes as I can in a list. I don't quite have to kind of do a full 2,000 points, especially now they got rid of the old attack bike and all, which I have quite a few of. Um, but I do have plenty of outriders. I do have an ATV. I do have So I'm beginning to appreciate Raven Wings significantly more than I used to. Whereas before, I think I was genuinely more Death Wing focused.
Cool. And then Law Lodge says, what is Maxine's take on Harlequins, and does she think they should have their own codex again?
Their own codex. For me, they're their own individual army. They've got enough units that you can kind of do that with, for starters. I think they have a lot to offer flavor-wise, and they play very differently than the other Eldar factions. They do have their own separate niche, so to speak. But then again, Harlequins are my flavor of Eldar. I like their playstyle. They're a playstyle that I think suits how I think quite. The ones that are very fast. I mean, they're quite very fragile, but they've got great combat. They've got great short range shooting. They've got plenty of tips and tricks. So they're ones that kind of try to interact with the rules of the game in a way that other armies can't.
Alex Stutz answered that question as well. Inner Circle Companions. There we go.
Yes, I do. Companions, and then in the triangulated words.
So there or thereabouts. Paint Sophages says, do you have a backup if someone drops Cypher on the table?
Do I have a backup?
Yeah.
No, but I do then gun for him. Although I did Dark Angels game with a friend called Ben, who also does a podcast called First Rank Fire, and he's very lovely. And we played a Dark Angels versus Dark Angels game. We were trying to figure out which one was the loyalist and which one was the traitor. It was just good fun because Dark Angels is one of the few armies that can fight themselves, and it's perfectly fine.
And then Legion 9 Paint says, we love you, Maxine. So there's a lot of love in the chat today. I like it when there's a lot of love in the chat. Dante Paint says, Horus Heresy Dark Angel in Interrupters, or however it's spelled, with plasma flamers. Don't know if that's a question, Gareth, or a statement. I'm not sure. Then Law Lodge says, does Maxine remember meeting me in Factorum many moons ago, back when Harlequins had more shenanigans than should have been legal?
Who was that, sorry?
That was Law Lodge.
Law Lodge. Yeah, I do remember. And I do remember going to that event where Harlequins were busted as heck. That was it when they had the Fate Dice era of early 9th edition or mid.
Yeah.
Super crazy. I think I went 4-1 with my Dark Angels, and I bumped in. I got knocked down by an Eldar army.
Yeah, didn't they get a massive nerf not long after?
Yeah, I was not. Don't worry.
Was it something like you couldn't target them outside 12 inches or something, even the vehicles, and so you had to wait till they were really close? And I do remember Liam Dempsey playing a game with them, and he played it once, and it was that one-sided. He said he wouldn't ever stream them again until they got a nerf because it wasn't fun to watch someone get tabled in 3 turns.
Output from their speeder was just insanity, and the fact that they could use the Fate Dice, they just nuked anything they saw, and they were so fast that you couldn't move around.
Then Matty Spett says, what do you think, when will we get Plastic Samael?
Not for a bit, I suspect. I think if he was to have come, he would have arrived alongside the latest releases. I'm afraid, like the interrogator chaplains and stuff.
And Gareth's go on, sorry, carry on.
Circle companions, I think he would have come by now.
Yeah. It's strange that he didn't come. To be fair, it was a weird omission.
Sculpt isn't holding up as well as you would want alongside the newer bikes. So it is a shame because now, like the new Belial, for example, looks great with all the other units. But yeah, it just feels like Ravenwing have been left in behind just a smidge.
Yeah. And then Gareth again, 40k Dark Angels, make Dreadwing great again. Now, I'm not a big Dark Angels person, so just explain to me what Dreadwing is, because I don't know what it is.
Is a very specific wing in the 30k era that was moved out going into the 40k era. So Dark Angels originally had 6 different wings. Dreadwing was one of those. Going into 40k, only 2 of those wings survived, which is the first company and second company. So that's your Deathwing and your Ravenwing. Much as they should be Codex compliant, which is what was kind of pushed on them, they still kind of kept structure very, well, in theme, religious. Um, but Dreadwing was dropped, and I think Gareth is a fan of 30k and thus wants to see Dreadwing emerge into 40k with some of their own individual quirks, but I'd be surprised if they did that.
And then just popped up, I've been finally caught with chat. Fifth Horseman model says, much love, Maxine. Hope all is good with you.
Oh, thank you. Things are very well, thank you. I'm finding my way in life, which is
All any of us can do at the end of the day. And then one of the questions we got asked in the week from Tree Strider, what's your favourite biscuit? So completely different from what we were just talking about.
Favorite biscuit? Well, I like to say cookies, if that counts, because I like Maryland cookies.
What flavour of Maryland cookies? Is there a particular one?
I'm vegan. There's only really one option that they have that's vegan, I think, I think it's the double chocolate ones. But they're very tasty. I like those. But if we were to go out into more traditional biscuits, I might have to say bourbons.
I like bourbons. I'm a fan of bourbons. I'll take bourbons over custard creams any day of the week. Right, now, Paint Party Scott. Sorry, come on.
Americans biscuits. I like the little scones.
Yeah. We're not talking about, for Americans in the chat, we're talking about cookies, essentially. We're not talking about the biscuits you have with that weird white gravy stuff. That's just, yeah. We'll move on. So, Paint Party Scott, who's also a big Dark Angels fan, he said, the Dark Angels expert, how can I make ICC viable intent? Now, I didn't know what ICC was. I'm guessing now it's Inner Circle Companions. He wants to know how to make them viable intent.
I think that's always a very difficult question when people ask how can I make something viable. I think almost any unit can be made viable. You just have to bring the right amount and the units around it to balance the more fun pick that you're bringing. Because as much as it's not strictly competitive in the sense that you don't want to bring too much of it, or there are better point efficient units that kind of do similar things, there's always a home viable. I think the best answer is bring as few of them as you can, and make sure you cover the areas that they don't cover. So in Circle Companions have decent combat and some durability and some little perks. So just make sure that you have some decent shooting around it and have some more volume bodies to be able to do different things around it. But anything can be viable if you build a list around it. If you start with them, put some extra competitive around them, or like traditionally cost-effective units in and around them. Because I would openly say I'm not someone that's a massive list builder. I'm not someone who looks at the best points efficiencies or goes into that much detail or looks for like these really super secret combos. I'm someone that tries to plan. I choose models that I enjoy. I then, with those models, build a list around them to go, right, what is my game plan going to be to meet the rule sets that I'm playing for? Intent that requires you building a very balanced unit or a very balanced force, either at 1k, 2k, how many points you're playing, where you're trying to move around the board as best as you can to score many secondary objectives, which are very high scoring, but also durable high objective control on certain primary objective points. But also that sort of like balance and trade-off between strong shooting, which 10th edition you can get plenty of, the ability to take down tanks, which are an ever-present threat, but also having enough bodies and things to be able to stand and stay alive on objectives. So when I choose my fun units, I try and make sure that I can meet those objectives outside of those units. So if I bring like a brick of Terminators, for example, because I'm like, yeah, I love Terminators, they're great, and I'll go, right, they fit this primary role pretty well. They're pretty durable, they've got decent combat, and they can sit and do primary. Brilliant. How am I going to get these secondaries done? Okay, well, I can bring a couple of units of infiltrators, for example, because they can pop up, move around, and be fairly durable. I can have a couple of spikes, maybe, to be super zippy and zappy. Then it's going like, well, now I'm struggling with anti-tank. Okay, right, so maybe what if I bring like some Redemptors? What if I bring some Eradicators? Does that cover it? Do I need a bit more? What if I bring my own tank, maybe? And then it's a case of like, can you hide behind certain terrains with these units? Can you make sure that they synergize in some way, shape, or form? A particular, model or like HQ unit can make sure that some of these units can like gel together a bit better. And just have like a key acclaim panel trying to achieve if you go into like a super spammy list of like 120 orc boys, for example. Can you have something that can deal with that? Do you have a lot of small multi-shot stuff? Well, if you run into like 10, war dogs, for example, can you deal with that? And just ask yourself those questions. But make sure you choose the models you ICC.
And JT, JT drop. I think I'm sorry. I do apologise. I didn't mean to offend you. He says, "Whoa, whoa, whoa! Weird white gravy. You mean the best breakfast sausage gravy? Good person." Yeah, if you say so. I only had it once, and it wasn't for me. But I'm not American, so I don't. I can't really comment any further.
Didn't know. The accent didn't give you away.
Lord says, sorry, all I should have started with that was an account formerly known as Bolt Rifles. Should make my questions to Max make more sense. Well, Maxine did say she remembered you. So
I remember talking to him about Harlequins. He's a big fan of Harlequins.
there you go. Um, this one was asked my nose paints. Now it sort of applies because I know you recently started. Because I know you're not really a painter or a builder much, but I know that you got some Tomb Kings that you started building. So we can sort of carry on from that. He did say, "What's your best advice on overcoming paint burnout?" So we could get into that though, because I know that painting wasn't really your thing, but now you were at least trying to branch out into it. How are you finding that?
Because I'm colorblind, it makes it very challenging. And I guess because I do have that angle where I want to sure it's right, I did that I would ruin something that I think could be very nice. Um, it's definitely a challenge. It's one I'm beginning to tackle in small doses because I do struggle with the motivation to like prioritize the time for it. I have a lot of things pressed on my time management at the moment, just in general life, sort of like building. Um, but I think the ways that I best motivate myself to do it, slash, um, can find ways to make sure I spend the time to do it, is to have like dedicated audiobooks that I listen to for specific tasks that I do. So when I'm painting or building, I have a very specific Horus Heresy book that I listen to. Well, not specific Horus Heresy book. I go through the Horus Heresy series while doing that, and I listen to them. And so instead of me going, oh, I need to do this painting, I'm like, oh, I should listen to my Horus Heresy book. That would be really nice. So then I go and I listen to my Horus Heresy book as I do my thing, and I'm like, yeah, I'm enjoying this book, and I complete the task that may be a little not my kind of thing as I do it.
JT Job says, "Color blindness. I feel your pain. They're being red green color blind, especially with my Dark Angels green." So yeah, I guess that is a challenge when you've got a green army, and it could be a
Yeah,
challenge.
I like how they look to my eyes, but painting them would drive me insane. But I mistakes and I wouldn't know,
Yeah.
which I find particularly daunting about painting. Because people say, "Oh, no, it's not that hard." I'm like, I know the technicality is not that hard, but like if I make a mistake, I will have no idea. And when you're trying to do like edge highlighting or the more the detailing points, it's like I'm just guessing, which is a horrible horrible thing to be doing, and you can easily like paint the wrong paint onto something, or like if you've got like a wet palette, for example, you can just start mixing things together. Like these are things that are things that I'm spotting as I'm doing it, and I'm finding ways to overcome them. That's possible, but requires a lot of bad, bad, bad things going wrong fast.
Yeah, yeah, I can imagine. Well, I can't imagine, but I can imagine. If you see what I mean? It's definitely going to be a challenge. And Fiona Miniature says, "I love your way of working systems out, putting an army together, or how to paint, etc." And then if we go on to, and I've got to read my own writing again. Um,
I the mode.
okay, so 41st Millennium Dave says, "Do you think there should be more time between editions?"
Yes and no. It's
Okay.
easy. I would say definitely I appreciated spending a lot more time learning an edition when there was like a big 5-6 year gap between editions, because I didn't have the time to go, right, this is my full-time hobby. This is my main thing. I'm going to be doing this twice a week, 3 times a week, and I'm going to like really learn it and enjoy it. It made it a lot the game much more accessible when the rules just didn't change over a long period of time. It was like picking up a board game. The rules hadn't really changed. You can get back into it after like a couple of minutes of reading. You go, oh yeah, I remember now. So there's a lot of perks for the casual player when the edition doesn't change that regularly. You don't have to buy a new set of books every time you fancy a game. You don't need to do that. Check out what the latest FAQ is, because even though it's free to download these FAQs and things, it's a bit of more of the time sink into something you wanted to just pick up and play in an afternoon. You then spend a couple of days preparing for it, which has its own challenge. Um, what I do like though is that if it is your main hobby, that it does change and update, because it can easily get stale with what's good and what's not when you're looking at a more competitive angle. And if you're trying to balance it with your friends or in your local meta or going to competitions, having an edition slash regular balance plates makes it so much more enjoyable and so much more. I don't want to say fair, because 40k is never fair. It's never going to be fair. But it makes it so much more strategic. So, would I like to a bigger time gap? I think slightly bigger in terms of between editions. Like maybe instead of like 3 years, more 4 or 5 years. Um, but I know it's a very fine balancing act.
And Fiona Miniature says, "What's the thing that has changed in the rules you dislike the most?"
I very much liked having Space Marine factions with their own books and supplements and their own special rules. It made me very sad when they said any army can beat any. The paint scheme was basically irrelevant.
Mm-hmm.
Dark Angels can play like Ultramarines and have Gilliman in it, or like those kind of units in. It lost a lot of their feel from that, and I guess I liked having the old. I didn't like the change to you can bring whatever. I liked that you had fixed attachments that you had to kind of fit in. It was kind of like building a deck of cards for say like Pokemon or other. You can just like spam anything randomly in there. I understand why they did it. It does make it much more accessible, but I liked that flavor. In terms of the rule set, which I think may also be the question, is I preferred how terrain used to interact a little bit more. Whereas now it's almost like everything gets blanket -1, or
Mm-hmm.
blanket standard cover. almost no matter where you are on the board. I think it's just lost a little bit of that flavour that you get, and some of the nuance you can get from moving between different types of cover.
How are you finding Dark Angels Intent? Do you use their detachment rules, or do you do what a lot of players do and use the detachments from the Space Marine Codex?
Because I don't like that change, I do always use the Unforgiven set, or now into the new, like the Deathwing ones that you can get in the new Codex. Because I didn't like that change, I know that it's strictly worse, and it's not. And it's often a rules and or stratagems that are very, you can't plan around them. It's great when they come off because it requires you being battle shock and they're really powerful, but you can't plan a game around it. But I use it specifically because I like to feel like I'm playing Dark Angels.
Yeah. So that sort of falls on what Saint Celestine's just asked. She says, "Is story and narrative very important to you?"
Yes, I think is the answer. As much as people can see me as a more competitive style player, and I will always play in a very, I wouldn't say a min-max way, but I will always do what's strategically right to make the mission. And I'll do that to my abilities because I enjoy that. When it comes to list building, that's where I feel like, or creating a game scenario, that's where I feel like narrative is important. At least to me, because I feel like then the models I have on the board are something I can relate to and feel like it's a real. It helps with the immersion, right?
Yeah.
So to me, yes. Like it would drive me insane if someone was trying to play like Chaos Space Marines alongside standard Space Marines playing against someone playing with demons or something like that, or at least if it was structured for a more narrative game in tournaments, that's totally fine because like tournaments are tournaments, right? But I think narrative is important to me, at least.
So we've got a question from First Rank Fire. They say, World Eaters or Dark Angels, you have to pick one.
If you asked me 2 years ago, I'd always say World Eaters, but I think now I'd say my Dark Angels. If my house was on fire, I'd rescue my Dark Angels before my World.
Okay. Fair enough. So is it with the two different armies? Obviously, one's loyalist, one's traitor. Is it the lore that got you into them? Is it the paint schemes? Is it the way they play? What pushed you towards say Dark Angels over World Eaters or World Eaters in the first place?
World Eaters were my first collection, and I had they were my only army for 15 years, maybe going even to 17 years. Like they were my only thing. I got into them because as I said earlier, that I liked the structure of Space Marines and also the big monsters, and I liked to smash the two together. I went with World Eaters because I preferred Khorne as an aesthetic. I think Nurgle's a bit gross. Tzeentch confused me. At least I didn't enjoy their demon side of things. I really enjoy the root. Now I love the Thousand Sons. I think the Thousand Sons are amazing. But back in the day, I was less keen. Um, and, and right, which ones have I covered? I've covered Nurgle, each, and Slash is like meh to me, if I'm honest. And I preferred to have a specific flavor as Chaos Space Marine. I wasn't someone who's really interested in like Black Legion or Iron Warriors. I just for some reason that never really appealed to me. So I went with World Eaters, and I really liked. They have bunny ears, and I thought that was cute, and liked their more vicious tendencies. And as I began playing with them more, I enjoyed their play style. I enjoyed their lore. I enjoyed that they were quite simply minded, but the way you played them on the board was very tactical, right? See, they were as much as people just go, "I'll throw them up and just attack." I was like, actually, you get a lot more out of this army if you're quite good at positioning. You can trap, you can just snare opponents, bring them in, bait out certain units, and I think they work pretty well. My World Eaters collection is beginning to look quite aged now that I've had this huge refresh. I've not been able to update my World Eaters, sadly. Um, so I haven't had a chance to really play with them too often. I actually now don't have 2,000 points for the new codex, which makes me really sad because a lot of my World Eaters stuff was not specific to World Eaters because it was like a lot of like standard Chaos Space Marines, like Legionnaires now they're called, and cultists and those kind of units rather, and even things like obliterators. I loved my obliterators. Um, so they're now kind of like a word bearer's offshoot. So I enjoyed that about the World Eaters. Going to Dark Angels was more of a logical decision at the time that then began becoming a more emotional affair. Because the logical decision is I had some base models. I wanted to send. At the time, I was only able to play with one person because of lockdown, and having some sort of variance would have helped make things a bit more interesting. Um, so I had these models, so I was like, right, what Dark Angels feels like a great starting point. So let's go, right, do I like the lore of them? I did some research, going, yeah, you know what, I do. Do I like their playstyle? I then considered the fact that the three armies in one, they have lots of different options. I quite enjoy the tanky, durable. I was like, great, this feels like it's working out all right. So I think they look good on display. Yeah, they do. Fun. I think they do look great. So yeah, that's how Dark Angels came about. And I built a competitive list. I got someone to paint me that competitive list built. And by competitive, I mean a list that I made with models that I liked, and I felt played the edition of the game that was around at the time pretty well and followed a strategy that I liked. I picked it, chose it, went to a tournament the first time it arrived, and they did great.
So, how you found things? I mean, you said you've been in the hobby for 19 years. How have you found being a woman in the hobby has changed and evolved over the last 19 years? And what is there a difference between when you started and now?
I would say you saw a lot less women before, um, and it was more of an oddity. But I would say that, and now it's you go to tournaments or events. I'd be shocked if I didn't see one. It's still only one sometimes, but I'd be surprised if I didn't see one. And online, I've built a good group of friends and connections that I'm seeing on on that are into the hobby either as gamers, as painters, are some more, lore enthusiasts, or some have been more interested in the cosplay side of things. Some more interested in, you know, the more what's it called, where you mash things together, kit bashing. That's the word. Some for those kind of things. So, but originally it was definitely so. Um, but I would say to caveat, I didn't engage so much with the community when I was that sort of age group. I mainly just played with my friends
Mhm.
at my school, um, and kind of was going on from like 18, 19 age through to mid 20s. I was quite caught up with university work and other things that I ended up only playing with my partner at the time. So it wasn't exactly like going out there to events or like trying to engage with like a hobby club, for example. So I couldn't tell you what it was like necessarily because like most people didn't play Warhammer.
Yeah, yeah, fair point. And so, have you played in any have you played in any tournaments since 10th? Have you been to any tournaments
Played
or?
for a few games. I haven't actually gone to any events yet. 10th kind of dropped a very busy time. And then I had like a few life events that kind of meant like I had to like refocus some things away from 40k for a bit. particularly at weekends. So it kind of meant investing like a 2 days or a day into an event was pretty challenging. And sometimes it can be a challenge just to find an evening to play a game. Um, so I haven't, but I am relatively in contact with the 40k scene because I have quite a few friends and quite a few old friends who play in the 40k competitive scene. Um, and I've been enjoying seeing how they're getting on, what kind of lists they're bringing, what kind of challenges they face when they go to like 40k games. So I'm hearing it's becoming a bit more. It's quite a there's a bit of a change, and there's a lot more teams going to events now, and there's a much more emphasis on making sure like a team is doing well at an event or is scoring good points rather than just individuals. When I went, it was definitely more individual focus, whereas now you can see a lot of people in team shirts and stuff, which I think is great. I think making competitive 40k closer to a sport is probably not a bad thing in many ways, at least to me.
Would you be tempted to join a team?
Yeah, I would be tempted to join a team. I think that actually adds a lot more to it because like you get to plan the list you're bringing, talk about your strategies. You can meet up prior to do some practice. You can talk about what your potential matchups are. And it becomes more of a team effort that if one person does really well, then you can cheer them on. If one person's having a tough day, they'll pick you up, and it gives less pressure on, I guess, you to do, to perform, and actually you've got a team around you to kind of help you support. I like that. I'm a big team sports player, um, so I see that as nothing but a benefit.
Tournament just says Boltstone team because they're a shop that I'm affiliated with is Boltstone Wargaming, and I do have a tendency to mention every stream. So thank you for that. Just popping that in there. So yeah, I can sort you out at Boltstone. They have got a team. They do t-shirts. I have a Boltstone Wargaming t-shirt with my name on it, so I can probably hook you up with that if you're interested.
The peak parts. I have one of my friends that I was thinking of when I saw this as part of Team Hive Mind. And I know Vanguard Tactics has their own shirts going out. And, I think that's a great part of the book. I know lots of people can find that off-putting in the competitive scene, or find that the people that turn it into a sport, like it takes away from the hobby. But I don't see that angle.
So, favorite army to play against? Who do you enjoy? What armies do you enjoy playing against?
Some of my favorites are orcs because I think, and I quite like playing against Tyranids. I think they're just like the ultimate bad guy. It kind of feels like you're playing it like a zombie shooter, and you're just like trying to hack off all these like these evil bodies that are coming for you. I think they're fun to play against. I know some people don't like them, but I think they're great. Um, if I was to go for like one where I want to enjoy the aesthetic of the game and just to enjoy what my army looks on the board, how their army looks on the board, how they interact and play against each other. I quite like playing against Necrons and also playing against Harlequins.
So, if you had to start again, let's say that you weren't that you had to, you say the fire happened, you couldn't rescue the Dark Angels, you had nothing, you had to start from scratch. Would you go for the same armies again, or would you have a complete change? And if you had a complete change, what would it be?
I would go for Dark, but I'm going to remove them from the equation just to help, I think, structure this a bit better. I would probably select Necrons, followed by Harlequins.
Any particular reasons?
And actually, I'll rule it out. I'm going to have one Xenos, one Chaos, and one Loyalist faction. I like having those three. At the moment, I've got a bunch of Necrons, and I want to make up some Necrons, and that would be my Xenos army. I'll have my Chaos army. I'll have my Loyalist army, and I feel like my collection would be complete. If I was to do it again with three different ones, I would pick as my loyalists. Actually, I can pick for my chaos. I would pick Thousand Suns in a heartbeat. I think they're great. The Rument Marines, the Scarabocot Terminators, I think, are just gorgeous. And that, as my Xenos, I choose Harlequin. And then as their own faction, okay, I think they do deserve to be their own thing. And then as my loyalist, that's a tough question. Probably salamanders.
Okay, so we get still sticking with the Space Marine theme for loyalists.
Their structure. I I quite like Ultramarines, and the only reason I'm plucking for salamanders is because I prefer them in the lore, and,
Yeah,
and I don't.
yeah.
Because Latin to me, it all sounds the same. So all the names, when I'm like reading a book for like or listening to a book for Ultramarines, they just all have the same name in my brain. I can't like you know, the, like those old Roman style names. They all blur together for me. I don't know who's talking or speaking. So
Yeah. Fair enough. I can't disagree with you there at all.
I always think like if I was to be any character in 4K, I'd be Vulcan.
Not a bad,
He'd be
not a bad character. Not a bad character to be. Jeff Kelrev says, Maxine, do you know Chick Paints personally?
I don't know her personally. I know her stuff. I follow her on Instagram, but I don't know her personally. I've met a lot of great people, both either well-known Instagram people and also smaller Instagram channels, or just like individual hobbyists. But I've not had the luxury to meet you.
Then Inferno Miniature says, make Tau work.
Tower is always a struggle. In my opinion, I'm not the biggest fan of Tower as a playing army because I'm not a big run and gun kind of player. I don't enjoy the shooting game quite as much. I think it has a part, but I don't like it when it's the thing. Um, One thing I do love about Tau, I love their aesthetics. I think that kind of sort of like Japanese aesthetic to them. I think they're absolutely stunning, and a well painted army, particularly in like the more white scheme. I think this looks really stunning. Um, but if I was to have a Tau army, it'd be Kroot only. I think Kroot are great. I think weirdly, if you were to balance Tau, it would be to find a way to make Kroot good. You give them and I know people say, "Oh, but Tau is now no longer Tau." It's like, yeah, but now your shooting isn't so ridiculously overpowered, but you've got some decent combat, some speed, maybe some durability, and some of the animal style units. Um, it gives you more tools to work with, and I think that's how I'd put more Kroot focus in. And now they've got some new models, maybe they might. I don't know.
I haven't. I know some people that did get that Kroot box set. I mean, the models are great, but apparently Kroot aren't very good. But I don't know. Um,
I don't remember an edition of the game where they've ever been good, and it makes me sad because again, if I was to have Tau, I wouldn't have any of the Tau units. I would have just the Kroot because I think Kroot are great. I'd have 2,000 points of just Kroot. But they've never been good. And I think if you find a way to make them more usable, I think it will do a long way to try and make Tau a bit more of a well-rounded army, and thus make them a bit more playable because it's less likely to break the game. Because units, armies that are very one-dimensional, sometimes Harlequins, sometimes it's Knights, sometimes it's you know, more tank focused armies. I know sometimes armies like Iron Warriors can just become actually what's the lowest ones? Iron Hands. They can become just busted because they enjoy very specific units, and when those units are good, it or that a certain playstyle is, they just become so really strong. So I think finding a way to try and balance any army is quite good. I know Knights do it with the War Dogs a little bit. It kind of tempers them a bit, but yeah, that's my 2 cents on it.
Yeah, Matthias has just come in with a, so you would recruit them. Very good. Very good play on words. Well done.
That's language. I'm very impressed with how he uses the English language to make jokes.
So outside of 40K, you're quite into rock climbing and things like that. So how was that something that you used to do before you got into the hobby, or is that a recent thing?
So my main sport historically was cricket, and I used to play semi-professionally. But the last 18 months or so, I started bouldering. Um, and I'm someone that loves problem solving. I'm also someone who's very physical, and I like doing physical things. Uh, bouldering is perfect. It is something that I found a big love affair for. And then I've enjoyed getting stronger. I've enjoyed kind of being able to do more things with my body and actually just, being able to do that one arm. I think that's fun. But in the last like 6 months or so, I found it as a great way for me to meet a very diverse group of people because the network and community around it is brilliant. 40K is obviously very good as well, but it's a great way if I want to go out and just start chatting to a new random person. It's very easy to do that climbing because you can be standing next to a climbing problem and you're both looking at the same problem. Very easy just to turn and go, well, what do you think of this? How are you tackling this? And then start asking them more probing questions. And as I'm someone that's relatively new to a new area, I didn't really have many friends here. I now have, from climbing, more friends to be with and to see, and I consider them all very close friends that I have invited around and doing loads of different things. And I've gotten into doing the harness climbing, so lead climbing and top rope. So with the ropes and all that kind of thing, I'm going to be going outdoors and as the summer goes on. Um, it's something I've enjoyed massively, and it's really helped give me, I think, a lot more confidence and also make me have a place in life, which is very fun.
Yeah, that's good. That's great, to be honest. So is that what's, are you more focused on that now at the moment than you are on the 40K side of things and the hobby side of things? Is that taking most of your time?
As I said, I'm in a bit of a more life rebuild phase, and climbing is offering me that kind of those kind of things where I can build a very diverse friend group. Um, that point on this, I've had some dates from people I meet there. It's a very good way to meet people that you can kind of hang out with in that way. 40K is a bit more challenging when you're maybe more inclined to go. Because as much as I said you might find one, you
Yeah, fair
don't
enough.
get kind of a little. I'm just trying to make sure I meet a diverse group of people, I guess. I think climbing is a good way of doing that. And again, I'm very physically active, so as much as I love 40K, it's very difficult to have weekend after weekend of more just standing when I'm wanting to like throw my body around like a mad person.
Have you played any Old World yet? I know you got the models. Have you ever tried Old World or?
I thought it was really good fun. So I built up the models that I played with. They were in grey, sadly. But I played to test the game with one of my friends who's relatively local. He had some of the old orc models, or like the not the orcs, but the little small goblin guys. I can't remember the name. I'm not so well versed with AOS or fantasy sometimes. Um, but I played a little practice game. It was a very small scale game, but I enjoyed how it worked. I liked Rock and Fire. I played some like more Napoleon war games before, and I enjoyed this one. Definitely complicated and requires some reading, but it's no more complicated than 40K. I thought it was a lot of fun. I enjoyed the lore and story around the sort of the fantasy and old world era. I never got into AOS and that sort of story arc. For some reason, I just didn't find that as a. but I did enjoy the fantasy stuff because I love fantasy as a genre. I love like Lord of the Rings. I think it's an amazing. I love Warhammer Lord of the Rings Middle Earth. I think that's a fantastic game system. I love playing that. But yeah, like I enjoy fun games.
Did you did you ever, when you first started back in the day, did you ever play Warhammer Fantasy Battle, or were you drawn towards 40k?
I played one or two games, and the reason I did play the one or two games is because my mum didn't understand the difference between Warhammer 40k. And when I asked for Warhammer for my birthday, it was probably a long shot to assume that she'd get Warhammer Chaos Space Marines, which I had as my collection. And it was a very small collection, so instead she bought me a Warhammer Fantasy Orcs and some of the Goblins. And it's like, I appreciate it, Mum, but it's not quite what I was going for. But I built them anyway. And I had a friend who played fantasy, so I had a few like very small skirmishes, I would say, but it wasn't like anywhere near the scale I could bring up 40k, which wasn't much either. But I had like more than 2 units.
I was the other way, that I played fantasy, and then you ask your parents for stuff, and then they get the wrong one because it's all Warhammer as far as they're concerned. And I got Warhammer 40,000, and that's how I got into 40k, because I got that. I just saw Warhammer, bought this book, and it was just like, oh, okay, well, it isn't what I wanted, but I'll read it anyway. And that's how I got into 40k.
I think I would fantasy just as much as 40k if my friends were playing fantasy. But my friends are playing 40k because I enjoy both genres as much as each other. I'm probably more of a sci-fi girl in general. I love things like Doctor Who, Stargate, and things like that. But um, I do have an enjoyment and appreciation of the fantasy models and aesthetics and the story around it.
So, Fernand said, do you play box games like Blood Bowl, Warcry, etc.?
I've not played them physically. Blood Bowl I've played online, and I think it's very fun. I enjoy American football, so it wasn't a big stretch for me. I think it's a city game in terms of Blood Bowl itself, which I think is a plus. I think it's just fun to do with a friend online because, as I said, I moved somewhere I didn't necessarily know many people around, so playing online games with friends was one of my ways to connect with people and to kind of remind myself I'm not alone. So playing a Blood Bowl is one of them, and it's a lot of fun. It's a big giggle.
Is it season? Is it the new one you're playing? Because there's two computer games, isn't there? There's one that came out like 2016, and then there's 2015, 2016, and there's a new one. Is it the new one you've been playing? Or?
Yeah,
And Finn says, what team? I don't know if that means. Let's answer both. I don't know if it means NFL or Blood Bowl, but let's answer both questions.
Miami Dolphins, if you want the real NFL. But if you're going for actually a Blood Bowl, I usually pluck the Skaven because I like the giant rats. I think they're quite fun. I have no idea what's the benefits of the different teams really. I'm very much a casual Blood Bowl player. Um, I'm more. It's one of those games you'll have with like a drink and some snacks kind of thing.
Yeah, there are Blood Bowl tournaments, but I don't. I mean, play Blood Bowl myself. I was a big fan of Blood Bowl when I was a kid. I don't see how I don't see how it can be competitive because it's so stacked. I don't know how you could go into a tournament with say a halfling team and win.
Kind of the same. Like, don't get me. You can be strategic, but as you mentioned, sometimes what you bring affects the game quite a bit. So I just play the one I enjoy, and then my friend plays something that's sort of similar standard, and we try and play it strategically as we can, but we just enjoy the dice rolling and see what nonsense brings out.
Inferno says he loves the new gnome team. Have you seen the minis for the new gnome team? They are quite cool.
They do look very fun. If I was a painter, I could see myself enjoying doing those.
So what we say you say you sci-fi, you said you like your sci-fi. Is there a favorite sci-fi film or TV series that you can sit down and watch over and over again?
Oh yeah, I've got three that I'm like hooked on, and it's three big universes. Most people probably know them. So my first one was when I was a kid. I didn't have live television because I lived in the middle of nowhere, and it was back in a day way before digital. So BBC One was like static, like so I had to watch old videotapes. My dad was a big fan of Doctor Who. We had loads of tons of Doctor Who stuff, so I watched black and white Doctor Who's as my kids' TV. As such, Doctor Who is a very big part of, my life and also, you know, what I enjoy watching. It's my comfort watching. Is watching 70s, 60s Doctor Who. My dad even owns a Dalek because why would he? The other two is Star Wars. I love the universe. I love all the new TV shows they're doing. I love the animated TV shows they've done. All the films. Don't care. I love them all. But I think probably my favorite, and the one that I've now watched about 8 times in total, is Stargate.
Yeah, that's a good choice.
Brilliant. I saw it once when I was away skiing in America. I was like, oh, this is a cool show. Then my stepdad showed me the show. It was like, oh, this is Stargate. I think you'll really enjoy this. I've seen this. I saw this in America. It was great. And I watched the full, like, back-to-back, like, 10 seasons or something in, like, a month, maybe. And they're all, like, a series, episode season. I was, like, binging this like crazy. And I've seen it several times since. I enjoy all the spin-offs, and it never gets old. And what I did with my partner at the time was whenever we went somewhere new, we'd always watch Stargate because that was what in many ways made something feel more home.
Did you watch the original Stargate film before the series?
I did not. I watched it afterwards, and it was very jarring. Jack O'Neill and like Michael Shanks, Daniel Jackson and stuff. I was like, "Ooh, this is a bit different." I prefer the TV series and how that was structured, but it was nice to go back and see the film afterwards.
And Fernando says, which Doctor is your favourite?
Patrick Troughton always. I think almost all of his episodes are gold. But I do have an appreciation from the modern series of Matt Smith. And if you want to go for audios and you enjoy Big Finish, I would say Colin Baker is phenomenal, as is Paul McGann.
Troughton was Troughton the second Doctor?
69. And he was really good. And some of his stories were really good and well made.
And Fernando says Capaldi. So Capaldi's his favourite Doctor. What did you think of Capaldi?
Great. I think he got a lot of stick at the time for being quite grumpy and playing a doctor in a style that was more would have catered probably to when Doctor Who was a lot older. I think some of his stories weren't as well written as some of the other Doctors. I think Matt Smith kind of suffered from that in some of his seasons. Some of his stories weren't great, but he was phenomenal. I think Peter Capaldi suffered the same thing, where some of the storylines weren't great. And when he did get a good story, you could see him really shine. So as a Doctor,
In Fernando, sorry, I'm just confused by Sufi girl. What does I don't know what that means. Do you know what that means?
I don't know what Sufi is, but
I thought it was like a Doctor Who obscure reference. I didn't know what it was then. I thought I don't know what Sufi girl is. Just really threw me off when it came up.
souffle.
Oh, is it souffle? Right, yeah, looked like an eye from here. Souffle girl. Okay, it is. Does that make any more sense? Souffle girl.
That's Clara. That's one of the companions.
Oh, right, okay.
Sort of her iterations. I know it's getting way too deep probably for you, but one of her iterations was known as Souffle Girl.
Ah, right, got you. Yeah, I'm not a massive Doctor Who fan. It wasn't something that we watched a lot of. I've probably watched most of the Matt Smith and David Tennant stuff. But other than that, I don't really watch a lot of Doctor Who, so it doesn't really make a lot of sense to me.
The sort of like edit through Matt Smith. I watched the Peter Capaldi stuff and I enjoyed them, and then I'm still not caught up with Jodie Whittaker's because I don't have a TV license, so watching live TV is a challenge. I have to wait for the box sets to come out, and they're usually quite expensive. So at the moment, I'm only watching it when I go down to see my family, and even then, they're too busy wanting to say hi to me rather than actually watch Doctor Who, which is what I came for. So I get to catch up with some of the new stuff, and I'm looking forward to doing so. But I've fallen a little behind. So I have a big collection of all the classic series on my bookshelf, which I'm looking at now. I've got all of the episodes from 1966 through to 1971, and most of the episodes from 71. But I'm slowly building the collection.
Right. So I think we're going to wrap up with one more question. Because I'm aware of the time. With it being light, it throws me off now. I don't realise it's as late as it's late 'cause it's still daylight outside. So when you're watching Doctor Who, we've done your favourite biscuit. Obviously, with you being vegan, what is your favourite meal to eat while you're watching?
Oh, while I'm watching, it's something I'd probably like snack on, I guess. I mean, my favourite meals in general tend to be either Japanese food or stir fries. I love that kind of sort of like Asian style of cooking. So if I'm cooking, that's what I would want to go for. Recently, I've been trying to get into like more bodybuilding shape. I know this sounds quite cheesy, but my meals are fairly structured at the moment, particularly as I'm trying to be fairly lean during summer. But if I was to have something to snack on whilst watching, probably frozen fruits and maybe some dark chocolate would be what I'd pluck for. um, but if I was, to cook a meal or something, it's either sushi or like Japanese or like inspired food. That I love that. So if I go on a date or something like that, that's usually what I go for.
So you'd take your date to a Japanese restaurant out of choice first and foremost.
I'd always give them like Mexican or like something, or like Italian or something more neutral, just in case they're more picky on food. But it'd be what it was option I get.
Well, it's been great talking to you, Maxine. Thank you very much for persevering with me while we tried to get Instagram working. It's been a joy to talk to you. For anybody in the chat, where can they find you on social media? Is it just Instagram, or is there anywhere else they can find you?
Instagram. I do have a YouTube, but I've not posted anything on it yet, and I will eventually probably figure something out on there. But yeah, Instagram is my main platform really, and I'm trying to make sure I post a bit more. I've been quite quiet recently just because my life is moving very fast outside of sort of like 40k, and but I'm hoping to try and invest a bit more time back towards it going into either summer, maybe even into winter, sadly. But that's when I'll be putting a lot more focus. But there'll be posts coming through fairly regularly soon, I think.
Well, it's been great to speak to you. Thank you very much for your time, and we'll see you again very soon. Bye-bye.
Bye. Love you chatting.